from the Sewing Palace. I'm here to bring you our sewing club presentation via YouTube in these trying times. The topic of today's presentation is the Glamorous Clams, which is a beautiful pillow that was created by a woman named Deborah Louie. And Deborah Louie is from Australia. She's a Bernina ambassador, and she created a really comprehensive pattern for Berninas called Glamorous Clams. Now, the Glamorous Clams teaches you how to use your decorative stitches in the best way possible. This is a special edition pattern from Deborah Louie, which includes some instruction that's specific to the Berninas that we currently have in the line behind me. As you're exploring decorative stitches, some of the ways that Berninas can make decorative stitches more fun are some features like temporary altered stitch memory, which gives you the ability to make some changes to a decorative stitch, and those changes will be sort of remembered by the machine the entire time that you're stitching. When you turn the machine off, they go away. We also have something called a personal program, so if you find a decorative stitch that you really like, let's save it in our personal program. Another feature that the Berninas have is the ability to create combinations from one or more decorative stitches. I have numerous situations on this pillow where I have added two different stitches together. I liked them so much that I saved them in my personal program. One of the other great features on the top of the line machines is the Stitch Designer. And the Stitch Designer gives you the ability to create your own stitches or modify stitches that are already in the machine. So I took a cute little square right here. It was a stitch that actually stitched as a square and then another square side by side on alternating sides of the center. And I just wanted the square, so I took it apart and only saved half of the square. And I saved it in my personal program. Then the last really cool Bernina feature that you can use is you can import decorative stitches from your software. So if you have the Bernina Designer Plus software, you can import stitches into your sewing machine. Next, I'm going to show you some of the products that I found invaluable in making this project. Okay, I'm going to start at the beginning with how I prepared my clams. So the first product I used was the OESD Soft Web. Now the Soft Web is a fusible web, and the reason I chose this one instead of others that we have in the store is that the paper on the back of it is very papery. If you can see, this isn't very shiny and it's very papery, which means that if any of it is left in your product, it'll break down and wash out. Then, one of my favorite stabilizers is Ultra Clean and Tear. Ultra Clean and Tear is another papery stabilizer that breaks down well in washing. Now I put this behind some of my clams and you'll see that it tears really easily. Now if I leave any of this in my finished product, it'll just wash away over time. Later in the project, we're also going to use OESD Heavyweight Cutaway to provide ultimate of stability for the project. Now another product that I used for a few of my clams is Stable Stick Tearaway. This is a sticky tearaway because I didn't want to worry about keeping this in the project. Okay, when I got started, I traced the clams from the clam templates onto the soft web, and then I adhered it to my fabrics. So these great templates come in the pattern. Then when I got ready to stitch, I had to decide what I was going to use to stitch the clams. So the first thing that I did was I wound bobbins with the bottom line. This is a 60 weight polyester bottom line or bobbin fill, and we carry it in two different sizes. So that went in my bobbin the entire project. Now, I have to tell you the truth, I didn't use the same color throughout the project. I used up a lot of bobbins that I had that were filled with bobbin fill of different colors. So embedded on the inside of my pillow is lots of different thread. Then I got started with my practice pieces. And these practice pieces have that stable stick tearaway, which is a sticky tearaway stabilizer. I started with a particular stitch and I modified the length, the width, the tension, and then I fooled around with some other things. So you can see that I've practiced quite a bit. Now, I was very religious about writing down the settings because I wanted to be able to go back to those settings if I found a stitch that I really, really liked. When I started using the black Aurifil thread. Now this is 50 weight, and you'll see that it has an orange spool. When I got done with the 50 weight, I decided I wanted to try it with thick thread, so I tried it with Aurifil 12 weight. So this is substantially thicker than the 50 weight. So the smaller the number, the thicker the thread. Then I went into my thread stash and I got out some isocord, which is a 40 weight. I got out my sulky 30 weight, and we've brought in some spools in kind of a rainbow of colors for you to try. And this is the 30 weight. I also tried a little bit of the jean stitch, which is to top stitch on your jeans. And I tried the coordinate, which is, I think coordinate is about a 20 weight. I'm not really sure, but it had some really interesting effects. Then towards the end of the project, one of the instructions is to quilt your clams onto a quilt sandwich, and I used monopoly, and monopoly is now one of my best friends, and I use it all the time. And one of the secrets I found with monopoly is if you move your needle all the way over to the right, it sews like a dream, and so I'm using it for other projects now too. Now, when I changed from one thread to another, I had to change from one needle to the other. And when I started with the Aurifil, I was using the 8012 top stitch needles from Superior. When I started to get thicker, I used the 9014s. And to be honest, I used the 9014s for probably 80% of my project, my finished project. There were some threads that did better with the 116. So when I used the 12 weight thread, that's the Aurifil thread with the red spool, I had to have 116. Then there were, I think it was the coordinate and the sulky really liked the jeans 116. So you have to fool around a lot with different products and different needles and different stabilizers in this project to get the best results. In addition, I fooled around with some of the things on my sewing machine. So on my 590, I used the high tension bobbin case. So this is a new bobbin case for the 4, 5, and 7 series machines. And what it does is it tightens up the bobbin tension just a little bit so that you never, ever, ever see it on the top. Then, when I got to my machine, I made sure that I had my hover turned on. And to turn on your hover, you go into settings, sewing settings, and it's in the needle up, needle down section. You can tell your machine to hover or jump up a little bit whenever it stops. This was really, really great because in this project, one of the ways to get decorative stitches to work really, really well is to just stitch a little tiny bit and then stop and adjust. And I had two ways of adjusting. I would use my hover, or I would use my freehand system from Bernina, because the freehand system allows you to move the presser foot up and down with your leg, so you can keep your hands on the project. So one of the other things that I did was I set my machine so that the needle was always in the down position. And then when I was working on my 590, and this would be important for those of you that are on a 4 series, a 5 series, or a 7 series, is I netted my thread. So I made sure that I had a thread net on. It's really, really important that the thread is feeding without hindrance throughout the project. That's all I have right now. I'm going to pass the mic to Nancy, and she's going to show you a little bit about the stitch manipulation.
Hi, I'm Nancy at the Sewing Palace, and we're going to continue today having some fun with Natalie and I doing Glamorous Clams. I'm going to take you through some preparation of the clams. We're going to show you how to iron on your stabilizer. We're going to show you how to draw your clams, and then we'll have a little bit of fun putting those clams together. That's the fun part. And then I'm going to show you some stitching on those clams that will take you to a new level. And are you ready to start? Let's do it. So let's gather some supplies. Right here I have my stabilizer. I also have collected a woolly felted mat. These are priceless. Also, I am using the Karen Buckley Perfect Scissors. They have a serrated edge, and they will make your cutting absolutely wonderful whenever you get to that stage of your preparation. Now, the stabilizer that I'm using, I can use it 2 different ways. This is such a flexible project that I can actually use prepared charm squares, 5-inch charm squares, and you'll notice that I've already put stabilizer on the back. When I put the stabilizer on the back, the wonderful templates that Deborah Louie has provided us fit perfectly, and I can cut them straight to the line. Also, if I'm using scraps, I could go ahead and just draw onto my stabilizer. When I cut these pieces out, I want to make sure that I'm cut just a little bit outside that line, about 1/4 of an inch, so that I get good adherence to my fabric whenever I put these on. When I do this, I can take any scrap of fabric that I have, layer them on, tear off the back, go ahead and iron them in place whenever I'm happy with them, and then cut them out with those fabulous Karen Buckley scissors. Once I have these on my fabric, I just cut straight to the line with this one as well. So now that you have all of your clams cut out and all of your extra pieces, remember you have just used up all the scraps that you could ever imagine. So now it's time for some fun. So I have several different shapes that I can mix and match between my arcs here. So I can just move them around as I feel like it. And notice I have small arcs, medium arcs. I do have a small arc down below. I can use them together. I can use them individually. And the other part is, because of the way that Deborah Louie put these templates together, I could actually cut a very, very wide one if I so chose. So this gives you a lot of flexibility, and this is where you show your personality, because this is where your clams are going to shine. So at this point, we have chosen exactly where we're going to iron on our arc. We're going to do a very simple clam right now to really highlight our stitches as we go. And you'll notice I have a woolly felted ironing mat here. Did you notice it is the perfect size for my sewing table? Did you notice? 5-inch clam? Coincidence? I don't think so. So once we have ironed all our pieces together, we have one more step to do before we start sewing. And that step is we're going to put a heavyweight stabilizer behind our clam. What it provides, we actually have a ultra clean and tear square right here, and we're going to use that to make sure that our stitches form beautifully on the top of our clam, and also it provides an ability to tear that away so that we have a very lightweight finished product that we're going to be able to make into our pillow or our throw. So at this point, let's go ahead and start talking about our machine. Now, every stitch on your machine is fair game. So as we stitch, we're going to be looking at stitch width and length for our machine. We can also use elongation within our information menu to make sure that we have the same density of stitches as we would in the normal stitch at the factory setting. We're also going to delve into combi mode, because we can go beyond just the stitches that are on our machine, and we can combine 2 to 3 stitches to make sure that we have something that is totally unique to our personality and to the personality of our clams. And as we're going along, you did hear Natalie discuss Stitch Designer, and that's another good function on our 790 and our 880 and our 590 that we can do to make those stitches even more personalized to what we enjoy doing on our clams. Now, remember I said that every stitch on your machine is fair game. So we have a little practice to do before we start our stitching. Have a 5.5 millimeter opening. Take a look at what you can do on your fabulous clams. So these are some opportunities for you to use your machine to the best of its ability. Some of those stitches you hadn't even thought of using. First, what I like to do is I like to program the back of my pedal for a stitch in place. So you can do that in your knot setting, depending on which machine that you have. Second, what I'd like to show you is when I pick my stitch, I have an information menu. A lot of you know about this. For those of you that haven't used it, let's do it. So I can elongate my stitch. What this allows me to do, as I make the stitch a little bit longer, it actually fills in, so it makes that stitch as dense as it was during my factory setting. So I can actually make a longer stitch, but it is still just as beautiful and thick as it was before. Another possibility that I have, remember the clear button is always your friend, I can go back into my information menu, and I need to make sure that I am stitching one full stitch at a time. This is critical because you're sewing on a curve. So the place that you want to turn is not in the middle of a stitch, but you actually want to turn at the tip of the stitch. So whenever you are only doing this one stitch at a time, you're able to have a very, very fine-tuned, beautiful curve, and you cannot see actual angles where you have changed your direction. So let's try one of these just for size. So we have all of our programming done. I've programmed my hover on this machine, like Natalie told you. And so now we're going to go ahead and stitch a couple more stitches. I've started already for a little bit of time. And so let's go ahead and see what our machine can do. I have the factory setting of this wonderful stitch programmed. So as I hover, notice I'm just turning so that everything that my machine sees is a straight line. So let's try this again. As I sew, I try to make sure that I finish with my needle in the center, but on occasion that's not going to happen. This isn't a crisis, because all we're going to do is just adjust on that very next set of stitching, and we're just going to continue to turn and go. So as we were talking about stitching, remember that you're going to need a little bit smaller design for those arcs that are a little bit smaller on your clams. So what I'd like to do is share with you some examples of classes that may be coming up in the future. Please keep an eye on our website. We're going to be using some thicker threads as well. A little bit of metallic, how would that look on your clams? Also, how about some couching? You can use some amazing materials doing some couching on your clams as well as any of your other projects. And also, how about learning about how to do some braiding? We have 2 fabulous feet that you can use for your braiding that will really enhance your clams a bunch. So thank you from Natalie and Nancy here at the Sewing Palace. We are so glad you joined us for Glamorous Clams today. We invite you to our website to learn so many more techniques through some of our online classes we're going to be presenting. And also, please go on YouTube and on Facebook. We have many, many techniques and inspiration for you during this time. So we wish you all the best and be well.